If you walked the 5,500-mile length of Latin America, you would pass through many climate zones, ranging from lush tropical rainforests to frozen wastelands not far from Antarctica. Factors affecting the climates of Latin America are distance from the equator, elevation, wind patterns, and ocean currents. Tropical climates. Three-fourths of Latin America lies in the tropics. Within the tropics, climates vary greatly. Some areas have a tropical wet climate. They include the Amazon basin, some Caribbean islands, and parts of Central America. There, warm temperatures and plenty of rainfall all year support huge rainforests. Much of tropical Latin America, however, has a wet and dry climate. In these areas, temperatures are warm all year, but half of the year is rainy while the other half is dry. A tropical wet and dry climate is found in the lowlands of Mexico as well as in western Central America and southern Brazil.
Several regions have temperate climates, as you can see from the atlas map on page 778. Paraguay, Uruguay, and northern Argentina have a humid subtropical climate. There, a warm season alternates with a cool season, much as in South Carolina or Georgia in the United States. The grasslands of this region provide excellent grazing for livestock, as well as good farmland.
Dry climates. Parts of Latin America have dry climates. Northern Mexico and part of Argentina have a semi-arid climate. Very light rainfall throughout the year allows some grasses to grow in these dry areas. Bordering these semi-arid areas are deserts. The Baja Peninsula of northeastern Mexico is a sun-baked desert. The windswept Patagonian Plateau at the tip of South America receives barely enough moisture to support stunted trees and scattered grasses. Neither of these areas is as dry as Chile's Atacama Desert, however. The extreme dryness of the Atacama is due in part to the rain shadow created by the Andes. Wind blow west from Atlantic across South America, dropping their moisture as they reach the Andes. As a result, the eastern slopes of the Andes, however, remains very dry. Ocean currents also affect the Atacama. Warm winds that blow east from the Pacific Ocean pass over the icy Peru Current, which runs up the west coast of South America. These winds drop their moisture at sea, so only dry winds reach the land.
El Niño strikes. Who would believe that a change in the ocean temperature near Peru could cause wildfires in Australia and flooding as far away as Madagascar? Yet these events occur every few years when the surge of warm weather off Peru, called El Niño, strikes. Normally, the cool Humboldt Current causes an upsurge of cold water along the coast of Peru. The cool ocean water provides nutrients for many plants on which small fish, such as anchovies, feed. The abundance of fish benefits Peru's fishing industry. Every few years, however, warm water surges south from the equator. The warm water prevents the nutrient-rich cool water from reaching the surface. This change usually occurs close to Christmas. This is why the warm current is known as El Niño, Spanish for the baby Jesus.
El Niño can bring disaster. The loss of cool water nutrients kills the small plants on which the fish feed. The fish either die or migrate to other areas. In 1972, El Niño destroyed a large part of the anchovy population. Sardines moved in to replace the anchovies and thrived for 10 years. By 1982, however, El Niño had killed so many plants that the sardines had either died or moved away. The fishing industry of Peru suffered greatly. El Niño also leads to drastic changes in the weather. Coastal Peru usually gets 1 to 5 inches of rain each year. When El Niño arrives, as much as 12 feet of rainfall may result in some areas. The downpours erode land, wash away homes and roads, and kill large numbers of people. In 1997 and 1998, El Niño caused droughts and wildfires in Australia and monsoons and floods in Madagascar. In the United States, record rainfall led to mudslides and flash floods. El Niño may strike at Christmas, but it definitely is not a gift.
This is a podcast about the elevation and climate and natural resources of Latin America. In much of Latin America, the chief influence on climate is elevation above sea level. Within a single country, the climate can vary enormously, depending on whether you are in the lowlands or the highlands. People in Latin America have their own terms for these variations in climate. Closest to sea level is the Tierra Caliente, or hot land. Lowlands such as the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico and the Amazon basin are located in the Tierra Caliente. In these regions, tropical crops such as bananas and sugarcane flourish. The next zone, the Tierra Templada, or temperate land, includes areas that lie above 3,000 feet. There, the days are hot, but the nights are cool. The Central Plateau and the valleys in the Andes are part of the Tierra Templada. Many cities are also found in this temperate zone. Coffee and tobacco thrive at this altitude.
The third zone is the Tierra Fria, or cold land. This zone includes highlands that are at least 6,000 feet, 1,829 meters above sea level. There, nighttime and winter temperatures can be quite cool. Major cities such as Mexico City and Bogota lie in the Tierra Fria. Farmers who live in this zone grow wheat, barley, and potatoes. Parts of Latin America are rich in natural resources. Some of its countries have valuable mineral or agricultural resources. Others, especially the islands of the Caribbean, have relatively few resources. Most Latin Americans have not benefited from the vast resources of Latin America. As you will read, the Spanish and later the wealthy ruling groups exploited these resources in order to promote their own interests. Gold and silver are the minerals that lured many Europeans to the Americas. Today, Brazil, Mexico, and Peru are still producing large quantities of these precious metals. Latin America has other minerals too. Chile is the world's leading producer of copper. In Bolivia, miners extract huge amounts of tin each year. Jamaica, Guyana, and Suriname have major deposits of bauxite, the clay-like ore from which aluminum is extracted.
Some Latin American countries have abundant supplies of oil and natural gas. Mexico and Venezuela have experienced the boom and bust of rising and falling oil prices. Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru also have large oil deposits. In parts of Latin America, heavy rains fill rivers that cascade down from the highlands. Countries from Mexico to Paraguay have harnessed the force of these rivers to produce hydroelectric power. Brazil, for example, has 7 of the world's largest hydroelectric plants. The economies of many Latin American countries depend on the export of cash crops, such as bananas, sugar, tobacco, coffee, and rubber. In addition, the rainforests of Brazil and Central America provide the world with valuable lumber. The export of farm products and minerals has contributed to economic dependence in Latin America. Countries that rely on single crops or goods are at the mercy of world demand. Also, natural disasters such as hurricanes and frosts can destroy an entire harvest. Since the 1950s, Latin American countries have worked to achieve greater independence by diversifying their economies.
Let's take a look at the people of Latin America. In Guatemalan villages, many children speak their local Indian language before they learn Spanish. In Buenos Aires, people speak Spanish with an Italian accent, a reminder of the millions of Italians who settled in Argentina. I wonder how they would say scafati. Scafati. Yeah. In Brazil and the Caribbean, people tell folk tales based on stories brought from Africa. These facts suggest the variety of people who live in Latin America and have contributed to the cultures of this region. Before Christopher Columbus reached the Americas, about 80 million Native Americans lived in the Western Hemisphere. They spoke a variety of languages and had many different cultures. Some lived in large cities. Others were farmers or hunters and food gatherers. Although the arrival of Europeans led to the death of millions of Native Americans, but their cultures survived in many parts of Latin America. After 1492, Europeans began to settle in Latin America. They included Spanish and Portuguese, as well as French, Dutch, and English settlers. Many Spanish and Portuguese settlers married Native Americans. Their children formed a new ethnic group called, wait for it, called mestizos, people of mixed European and Native American ancestry. During the 1800s, thousands of Asians settled in Latin America. They included Indians and Chinese who took jobs on plantations after the abolition or end of slavery. During the same period, European immigrants flocked into Latin America, as they did to the United States. Many Italians went to Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, and Chile. Germans, British, and other Europeans settled elsewhere in South America. Many people in Latin America traced their roots to Africa. Between about 1500 and 1800, slave traders carried millions of Africans to the Americas. You guys remember this? Please tell me you remember this. We talked about it when we studied Africa. Nod your heads up and down if you remember this. Good. Remember the term we used to describe what happened to a lot of the African cultures when the slave trades were happening? You remember it? All right, on three, everybody say it. 1, 2, 3. All right. Diaspora. Remember that term? Diaspora. A lot of those African tribes lost a lot of their traditions and cultures as they were separated during the slave trade. Africans were forced to work as slaves on plantations and in mines in the Caribbean, Brazil, and elsewhere. Latin American countries have a mixture of ethnic groups. In some countries, such as Mexico, Chile, and Colombia, most of the people are mestizos. Guatemala, Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador all have a large population of Native Americans. Many Brazilians, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, and Jamaicans have African ancestors, while large numbers of people of European background live in Costa Rica, Argentina, and Uruguay. Population patterns. Geography has influenced where people in Latin America live. A few areas are densely populated, while many areas are sparsely settled. Few people can live in the rugged mountains, deserts, or rainforests because these areas are so unfavorable to farming. Instead, people are concentrated in temperate highland areas and along the coastal plains. In Brazil, for example, the largest cities are Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo on the coast. The area between the Atlantic Ocean and the Andes Mountains has few cities. Climate and rugged terrain do more than limit where people live. They severely limit the amount of arable land that is available. Only about 6% of Latin America is suitable for farming, compared with 20% of the United States. Through irrigation, however, people in Latin America have created farmland in desert areas. Mexico has built water projects that now make it possible to channel water from mountain streams to the northern desert. In these irrigated desert lands, farmers produce crops of cotton, wheat, and vegetables. In Central America and Brazil, developers have cleared the rainforests to open up new farmland. The soil in the rainforests, however, is not very fertile. These cleared lands support crops for only a few years before they wear out, forcing farmers to move on. As in tropical Africa, leaching and erosion damage the land. Difficult communication. Landforms and climate have limited contact between people in coastal areas and the interior. During colonial times, cities such as Buenos Aires had closer ties to Spain across the Atlantic than to the interior of Argentina. Differences in cultures also contributed to the gap between coastal cities and the interior. Often, the interior was a stronghold of Native Americans or mestizo cultures, in contrast to the European cultures of the cities. Despite the changes brought by modernization, differences between urban and rural areas are greater in Latin America than in countries such as the United States.